There is one organ which causes high blood pressure, and it's not what you think. And there are specific exercises you can use to target and fix your blood pressure easily. No diet, lifestyle changes, or medication required. Check the link in the description below, but for now, today's question.
The question, if my blood pressure is optimal, can I eat a little extra salt? Answer by Amelie. It's very easy to lose track of how much sodium you consume on a daily basis, especially if you eat processed foods. More than 75% of the sodium we eat comes from processed foods like canned soups, lunch meats and frozen dinners, according to the American Heart Association, AHA. Sodium is an essential mineral that is naturally present in some foods, for example, celery, or added during processing. It should not necessarily be confused with salt, which is a combination of sodium and chloride. The AHA says, by weight, table salt is approximately 40% sodium and 60% chloride. About 90% of the sodium we eat is in the form of sodium chloride, and we all do need sodium. This mineral helps to engineer the actions of every human cell. Every human action, including eating, thinking, running and working, depends on adequate sodium. An enzyme in the body is involved with pumping sodium and potassium ions across the membranes of every single cell. So how much sodium do you need? In general, most people need about 1,500 milligrams of sodium daily. This is not a lot. 1,500 milligrams is the equivalent of about 2/3 of a teaspoon of salt. So as you can imagine, many of you may be consuming way too much sodium. And this may be very detrimental to your health. Too much sodium may increase the risk for developing hypertension, high blood pressure, and cardiovascular disease. Reducing salt intake has been identified as one of the most cost-effective measures countries can take to improve population health outcomes, says the World Health Organization, WHO. Key salt reduction measures will generate an extra year of healthy life for a cost that falls below the average annual income or gross domestic product per person. WHO also reports that an estimated 2.5 million deaths could be prevented each year if global salt consumption were reduced to the recommended level. And if you want to be proactive about reducing your taste for salt, it may be as simple as eating more spicy foods. It may literally change your mind, or I guess I should say brain, about salt. According to a recent study about hypertension, the enjoyment of spicy foods may significantly reduce individual salt preference, daily salt intake, and blood pressure by modifying the neural processing of salty taste in the brain. Study participants' preference for salty and spicy flavors, salt intake and blood pressure were evaluated. Those with a higher salt preference had a higher systolic blood pressure and a higher diastolic blood pressure than the participants with a lower salt preference. And not surprisingly, participants with a higher salt preference had a higher salt intake. But what is interesting is that a higher salt preference was also associated with a lower spice preference and ability to tolerate spice. And the participants who like spicy flavors were more sensitive to salt. Capsaicin, which is the main active component of chili peppers, appeared to influence salt sensitivity in humans. When capsaicin was administered to participants, it showed that capsaicin administration at half mol/L did not produce a burning sensation on the tongue but did increase the perception of saltiness. Most importantly, the brain regions activated by capsaicin overlapped with the brain regions stimulated by salty taste. Researchers from this study also tested their hypothesis in rodents, using optogenetics. They found that the administration of capsaicin had similar effects. But if you are going to add more spicy foods to your diet, please proceed with caution. Stay away from spicy, processed foods which usually have large amounts of added sodium. And make sure to read nutrition labels like a detective. Many hot sauces you can buy in the store have added sodium. Look for low sodium options. Another great way to add spice is by adding cayenne pepper, red pepper flakes, chili oil or jalapenos to dishes. I find that if I put a little bit of cayenne pepper in my dishes, I don't even miss the salt. But what if you don't like spicy food? If you don't like spicy food or if you have a bad reaction to it, use lemon and citrus instead of salt. You may not get the impact on your brain that helps to lower your salt intake that you may get from spicy food, but you may find that if you squeeze lemon on your baked potato, for example, that you don't even need salt. Another great way to add flavor to food without salt is through herbs, like thyme and parsley. Most importantly, if you already have hypertension or any medical issues, be sure to talk to your doctor about your sodium intake. For example, you may need less than the recommended 1,500 milligrams per day. Source: Make It Spicy. an unusual approach to lowering your blood pressure. I hope this was helpful. Enjoy your healthy life. Answer by Leanne Heisey. You mean you don't have hypertension at all? Some hypertensives are salt sensitive, others aren't. You'll know soon enough if you keep tabs on your blood pressure after taking a bit more salt. Still, I wouldn't exceed the 6 grams/day. Optimal salt intake is 3 grams a day. From Hypertension, Kidney, and Transgenics, a fresh perspective. Renal function curve showing the effect of mean arterial blood pressure, MABP, on renal sodium excretion. A. The equilibrium pressure that is maintained through adjustment in sodium balance. B. On sustained increases in salt intake, function curve shifts to the left to give a higher level of excretion at any given pressure. C. If these adjustments fail, curve shifts to the right so that a higher equilibrium pressure is required to match sodium output to input. So it largely depends on how your kidneys handle the extra salt load. Some even say we're far too much focusing on salt, forgetting sugar. A too low salt intake makes us eat more, to obtain the minimum amount of salt we need for our metabolism. So we eat more, grow fat, and develop all kinds of diseases. E.g. diabetes, hypertension, J, etc. See the wrong white crystals. Not salt but sugar is etiological in hypertension and cardiometabolic disease. Too much fructose 1 intakes might cause hypertension too. Just to make sure that you measure your blood pressure correctly, always discard the first measurement. You should repeat at least once to avoid falsely elevated, by as much as 27/14 of a millimeter. Hg. Blood pressures. From the benefits of aerobic exercise on hypertension. Answer by Craig Fraser. You mean you don't have hypertension at all? Some hypertensives are salt sensitive, others aren't. You'll know soon enough if you keep tabs on your blood pressure after taking a bit more salt. Still, I wouldn't exceed the 6 grams/day. Optimal salt intake is 3 grams a day. From Hypertension, Kidney, and Transgenics, a fresh perspective. Renal function curve showing the effect of mean arterial blood pressure, MABP, on renal sodium excretion. A. The equilibrium pressure that is maintained through adjustment in sodium balance. B. On sustained increases in salt intake, function curve shifts to the left to give a higher level of excretion at any given pressure. C. If these adjustments fail, curve shifts to the right so that a higher equilibrium pressure is required to match sodium output to input. So it largely depends on how your kidneys handle the extra salt load. Some even say we're far too much focusing on salt, forgetting sugar. A too low salt intake makes us eat more, to obtain the minimum amount of salt we need for our metabolism. So we eat more, grow fat, and develop all kinds of diseases. E.g. diabetes, hypertension, J, etc. See the wrong white crystals. Not salt but sugar is etiological in hypertension and cardiometabolic disease. Too much fructose 1 intakes might cause hypertension too. Just to make sure that you measure your blood pressure correctly, always discard the first measurement. You should repeat at least once to avoid falsely elevated, by as much as 27/14 of a millimeter. Hg. Blood pressures. From the benefits of aerobic exercise on hypertension.